Some residents with the idea was
our end is trying to phone.
We're going to start the meeting now. Thanks everyone for coming. If you want to take a seat and well, Harry Seccombe, chair of the forum. We were hoping for an update from the local police, but we haven't had a response from them this time. So we will chase that up, because I think it's important to have the police, every forum meeting, just to give us an update, particularly I suppose at the moment with this murder investigation stuff that's been going on the cliff tops. So we will chase that up and find out. I know there's something the superintendent is out, has moved on elsewhere, and I don't think we currently have a superintendent. Do we?
Yeah, to be fair, Harry, that's precisely it. Helen Deacon, who is the neighbourhood policing team inspector, has moved on, and there's been a little bit of a been quite bumpy getting somebody else in to supervise, because the work's been thrown onto the two police sergeants, one from Boscombe East and one from Boscombe Ash White, etc. So hopefully for the next meeting they should be back up on their feet. The councillors are going to have a meeting with the new inspector tomorrow, a virtual meeting. So we'll raise it at their officers and the representations.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. We'll chase that up ourselves as well. See if we can make sure that we have them here next time. So we just move quite swiftly along to our first topic, which is fly tipping and waste disposal. Obviously, we covered this a year ago in September as a topic. It was we had a number of points we raised, so we're following that on. We are at the moment waiting for Councillor Andy Hadley to turn up. He's not here yet. We have Ian Poultney here, and we're going to start with this is Ralph Grundy. He lives on, where's Andy now? Welcome. Just in time.
Nick of time.
So we have this is Ralph Grundy. He lives on Churchill Gardens, a local resident, and he's going to start off with a statement he's made, which sort of encapsulates some of the problems they're experiencing on Churchill Gardens.
Thank you, Harry. I stand up, I've hurt my foot, it's a lot easier for me to sit down, so that's why I'm sitting down. Good evening, my name is Ralph Grundy, and I've lived in Churchill Gardens for nearly 30 years. In this time I've seen many changes and ideas put forward and implemented to our square. Some good, some bad, and some just plain stupid. Years ago, the council would listen to local residents and would welcome their involvement and thoughts. This no longer seems to be the case. The council have described the square where we live as one of the most deprived areas in the country for years. I would firstly like to correct this statement, as I believe it to be very false. Having had my own businesses in Bournemouth and worked the area for many years, I can confirm there are a lot worse places to live than Churchill Gardens, including some parts of Bournemouth town centre. I cannot understand for the life of me how the square could be classed as one of the most deprived areas in the country, as most of the people live here, work and hold down jobs. My specialist subject tonight is fly tipping and communal bins. Around 2016, residents were surveyed whether they liked communal bins in the square where we live. We were told it would cut down on bins being left out and blocking the pavement. And having looked on Google Street View over the past few years, it would appear that very few were left out at any one time. Now, against residents' views, we have some 38 metal containers blocking the corner of our road, causing a hazard to drivers' line of vision and also pedestrians leaving the park as they are dumped on double yellow lines. We were also informed they would cut down on instances of fly tipping. We never had a big or real problem with fly tipping as we have today until these bins arrived, and I couldn't understand this statement. At the time, myself and the majority of other residents rejected this proposal and said no thank you. This we thought would be the end of this idea, but no, some months later we were informed by people who think they know better we're going to get our communal bins on a 6-month trial basis. I could tell this was a load of tosh and flannel from the outset. So they were duly dumped around the square. What followed was musical bins. They were moved all over the place, including into the park as they took away valuable parking spaces. Hence them eventually ending up being parked mostly on double yellow lined corners. It is a shame traffic wardens can't give these bins tickets as often they do residents who have nowhere to park. The 6-month trial came and went and nothing more was said to residents. All these years later we are left with these smelly, disgusting, often overflowing eyesore bins and constant fly tipping, a problem that the council has imported into our area. As soon as people from outside the area realised they didn't have to apply to go to or queue up long and tip, it escalated, and Churchill Gardens became Bournemouth Council's unofficial waste and hazardous waste transfer station. Bournemouth Council would be better off at this point transferring a member of staff from long and tip to Churchill Gardens to help with the organisation and direct fly tippers as to which bins to use. Fly tippers have no ideas which bins is for recycling or rubbish. I could sit in my front garden some mornings and count upwards of 15 cars or vans turning up and dumping their wares in our communal bins. Over this time we started to get midnight deliveries. You'd hear the dropping of bin lids most of the night. I went round one morning and found a bin load of bricks, which the 2 poor dustmen couldn't even move to their dust cart. One had a bonnet in it and the other had a car engine in it. On many occasions, past and present, people are unable to walk down the pavement in fear of falling over a mattress soaked in bodily fluids, old furniture and bags of rubbish everywhere. These bins are also unpopular with some of the dustmen. They often will leave some full or half full to cause issues for residents, and this has been going on for years if they just leave these bins full. Most recently, a crew came around the square. They drove round twice, emptied some bins and left the rest. When I went to check what they had emptied, out of the 38 bins I found 28 still full, 6 half empty, and 4 completely empty. We also have a dust cart crew that likes to remove rubbish from the bin that they don't like the look of and dump it on the pavement. The residents then have to go around and clear off after them. Bin dippers. We have 3 regulars that come around mostly during the night, going through our rubbish and seeing what they can find. So we have to be very careful of what we dispose of. I started to contact our local councillors on a regular basis this time, informing them of the situation. But alas, they must have cotton wool blocking their ears or didn't have their hearing aids in. I would see local residents in tears at this point, telling fly tippers to go away, only to have threats and abuse hurled at them. Rachel and myself started writing to council officials explaining how much extra this must be costing council taxpayers. In 2017, a fridge freezer to dump would cost between £75 and £125, dependent on size. Mattresses about 50, again dependent on size, plus removal costs. And we would get plenty of these items, and still do. All in all, this time we reckon this escapade was costing, on a good week, a few hundred, a bad week, thousands of pounds extra. At one point there was a fridge freezer that's been left in the road for over 7 weeks. I actually looked in a bin this morning. I saw a broken down piano in a bin. So I broke on a piano and stuck it in a bin. One of my businesses I had over the years was a successful house clearance company, clearing some 2 to 3 properties a week and employing 3 people. So I do have some knowledge of my subject. And Rachel has worked for a local auctioneer for over 30 years. Our letters were acknowledged, and that's about as far as we got. Around this time I saw my first fridge go into the back of a dust cart. I couldn't believe it, as this is classed as hazardous waste and releases gases into the atmosphere. What happened to the climate emergency Bournemouth Council declared? To follow this, I also witnessed a washing machine being dumped into a bin, which also went into the back of a dust cart. At this time, it was getting more and more difficult for residents to dispose of their own rubbish, as bins were constantly full up with fly tipping. Then came along the wise guys. There's the guys that get paid for prosecuting people for dumping their waste or whatever, you know. One of my neighbours took her recycling out the morning the recycling truck was due to attend. Unfortunately, the recycling bin had been filled with old turf the day before from a fly tipper in a transit van, so there was nowhere for her to put her recycling. Being a good Christian lady attending church every week, she decided to place it beside the recycling bin, hoping it would end up in the right place. One of the wise guys spotted it and went through its contents and found her address. As a result of this, she got an on-the-spot fine of £200 for being an easy target. At the time, the only money she had to pay was with her children's holiday fund. Unfortunately, we no longer have these good neighbours. I informed Jane Kelly of the situation, but there's really nothing else I can say about that. I spoke to the wise guy at the time and explained to him the situation and told him to go after real criminals, but they are not such soft touches. Wise guys have since explained to me they can do nothing to help with, as there is no CCTV in the area and so no evidence. I once confronted a fly tipper myself and ended up that night being threatened on my own doorstep by 3 burly gentlemen from outside the area. Luckily I knew one of them, so everything calmed down a bit. Since then I've advised all my neighbours not to confront any fly tippers. About this time Rachel gave me an old Nikon camera. I started to take photos of all the fly tipping. Some of you would have seen my pictures of the situation was starting to get quite bad around the square. I've had 5 front page articles in the Daily Echo in the last few years, with just the usual fob off response from the council. At this point we had 2 collections a week, 38 bins. This wasn't enough, so I started talking to the waste department and others, and after much hassle they agreed to 3 collections a week and daily collections of fly tipping. But this never happened, it was just more flannel. This means Churchill Gardens, we now have a capacity of 114 Euro bins a week, which is just nuts. This brings me to my next point, hazardous waste. This has been a common occurrence in Churchill Gardens related to illegal activity for years. I have asked many council-related people on many occasions, have these bins ever been risk assessed for the benefit of council employees or residents? I have never got a response to this question. Hazardous waste found in bins over the years, which should not have gone in the back of a dust cart, include, but not limited to, cans of paint, chemicals, televisions, electrical goods, fridges, creosote, oil, car engines, mattresses. They roll the mattresses up and stick them in the bin. Washing machines, MDF, builders' waste, plasterboard. The list goes on, but the worst must be asbestos. There's a question on the HSE website. Do I need a risk assessment before I start working with asbestos? The answer is a risk assessment must be carried out before any work with asbestos. Well, some of you got this, I'm sure, and there's quite a bit of information here, but there is one thing here, the procedures. If the waste is spread around or mixed with non-asbestos material, get an HSE licensed contractor to deal with it. That's it, there's no argument with that. I spent most of my life around asbestos. In one form or another, I expect most of us haven't, do not pay much attention to it and its effects until the day comes in some people's lives, 20 to 40 years later, when they're in hospital with incurable cancer or asbestos-related illnesses. I was in the Merchant Navy for over a decade, where asbestos was used as a fire retardant and pipe bagging. I know people have died from the effects of this asbestos many years later. In the 20 years of clearing out houses, I often came across it, and I've been trained in asbestos matters, as anyone who comes into contact should be. It is an employee's duty and a minimum obligation requirement as an asbestos awareness course. I was quite shocked the first time I came across asbestos in one of our communal bins in Churchill Road, and I informed the dustman of its contents. They left the bin. I didn't follow it up at that point, as they said they would inform the office, and I wanted to see what happened. The next day, 2 decently dressed men, possibly managers, turned up in a dust cart and tipped the contents, including the normal rubbish, into the back of it and drove off. I was speechless. The first rule of asbestos, if you suspect it before you do anything, is to have a sample taken and analysed by a proper laboratory before taking any further action that may be required. Sealing the bin up with warning notices and possible removal. The next lot I found was in Walpole Road, what looked to be a bin full, which included what looked like AIB, asbestos insulation board. That's one of the worst times. I phoned the waste department at council, informed them my concerns. Someone attended, looked at the contents and said it wasn't asbestos. It definitely was. Did they get a laboratory out to test it? No. Was the contaminated bin sealed up in the meantime? No. I put a warning sign on the bin myself, but it still went in the back of a dust cart. Not only could this affect council workers' futures, but those in the near vicinity while it was being loaded and crushed in the dust cart. It could also affect workers at the recycling centre, where the dust cart unloaded its contents. The next lot I found was a load of corrugated sheeting laying in the road at Borthwick Road. I remember phoning Jane Kelly expressing my concerns about what was going on. These sheets lay there for nearly 2 weeks. I don't know how they were removed, but I had my concerns as there were lots of its asbestos left all over the road after it had disappeared. There was no clean-up afterwards. There have been other incidents in the area, and I'm sure I haven't discovered it all, because you never know what's lurking in the bottom of a bin in Churchill Gardens. Most recently, there was some dumped in the street outside my house. I informed Councillor Canavan, who said he already knew about it. I've been away for a few days. Later that morning, some council workers turned up and slung it into the back of a van and picked up a few bits that lay in the road. I pointed out that there was some sheeting in one of our shabby Euro bins. The worker had a poke around in the bin and removed it and slung it into the back of the van. What happened to the risk assessment and procedures contained therein? These guys obviously had no specialist training or protection required to remove the asbestos. They did not dampen down the boards or dampen back them as required before removing it. Again, I was quite shocked and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There were still shards of asbestos laying in the road weeks later. No proper clean-up had taken place, although it was requested twice. I was not the only person in attendance while this went on. What should have happened? The area should have been sealed off and a specialist company called in to deal with it, as it was mixed with other rubbish. I put in an official complaint to the council, raising my concerns. They gave themselves 28 days to respond. They didn't. A week or so later, I emailed them again, and the response I got to my complaint within 24 hours was the staff would be sent for retraining. That was it. I asked in my complaint if the van had been properly decontaminated after the asbestos was removed. I did not get an answer. Hang on, isn't it the employer's responsibility to carry out a risk assessment and to ensure the staff are well versed in all procedures around asbestos and have the right equipment to deal with it? These guys weren't, as they did not know what they were doing. The next incident was some very damp bags on the corner of Borthwick and Walpole. I raised my concerns that this could be asbestos insulation, aka monkey muck, a very dangerous substance which should have only been removed by qualified, compliant person with the appropriate control procedures in place, subject to a laboratory test beforehand to identify the substance ashore. The area should have been sealed off with proper signage. Once again, when someone says asbestos, there are procedures to be followed. It just disappeared after a few days. I found 5 asbestos, myself and Councillor Canavan found 5 asbestos contaminated bins in Borthwick Road. I explained these bins needed to be sealed up and removed, ideally by a proper asbestos company, and either decontaminated or sealed up, whole, and put in the ground as they are. Again, these ended up in the back of a dust cart and off to the recycling centre. In the past 10 weeks, if each of these bins had been classed as an individual incident, there would have been at least 10 asbestos incidents in Churchill Garden. I have not included any texture coatings such as Artex that I found on old broken up plasterboard sheeting in the statement, though I often see it in these bins. There are many, many types of asbestos containing materials. My questions are these, though I don't need answers. Have the dustman or anyone else who removes asbestos from Churchill Gardens been on asbestos awareness course? Are the council licensed to remove asbestos? Does the council have insurance and licences to transport hazardous waste? This situation needs some sort of resolution, Communal bins in Churchill Gardens do not work in the current form. I guess one of the reasons the council won't deal with this problem properly is the sheer cost involved, yet residents, children playing in the park, and council workers and recycling centres workers, future and outcome to lives are being affected by this. Residents can no longer recycle in Churchill Gardens. Not our fault. Flytippers do not know or not interested in the difference between a recycling bin and a rubbish bin. All our recycling goes in the rubbish cart along with the asbestos. Thank you.
What did you say your name was?
Ralph Grundy.
Ralph?
Grundy, G-R-U-N-D-Y.
Yeah, it was quite an eye-opening set of things. We've obviously been seeing the pictures that Ralph's been posting on Facebook over the last year. We felt we really need to revisit this. We obviously discussed this a year ago, and promises were made to address the situation and sort it out. So I think we're now about to invite Stanley Hadley to come up.
Yeah, that was so thank you very much for that. So I'm afraid I'm new to the role, and I haven't got the back history on all of this, so this is all new and very shocking to me, because I haven't got anywhere near the experience that you clearly have in working with asbestos. But I know something about control of hazardous substances and how seriously that one should take it with asbestos. So obviously we did get some notice of the list, and Ian has been enrolled in the pool area before BCP, working with waste of all kinds. So I'm sure he's probably far better placed than me to tell you the details, but I am shocked, and I will be very keen to see solutions. And I think there's two bits, isn't it? One is about the communal waste bins in Churchill Gardens, and clearly we went for a 6-month experiment. We adopted it without perhaps going back, or we now need to look at that again, and then also how we deal with flytipping, particularly asbestos and hazardous waste.
So I think there's a number of things that have been raised, and it's far too numerous to cover today. I think, as you said, you don't miss all your answers right this minute. But I think the first thing is about the communal bins. So that was a legacy Bournemouth decision, and I believe.
Excuse me, Chair. Would it be possible? Sorry, Ian. Would you be for the public here? Would you be able to identify who you are?
Oh, sorry. Yes. Yeah, I'm Ian Pultley. I'm head of Ian Pultley. I'm head of environmental sustainable development, and I have the responsibility for policy around waste as part of my portfolio.
Sorry, Ian, I probably should introduce myself as well. So that's great. I'm Andy Hadley. I'm the portfolio holder for environment, energy, climate change, and flooding and coastal erosion management and sustainable transport.
And if I may, when you say head of, exactly how high up is that?
I report to Kate Langdown, who is the Director of Environment.
Okay.
Who in turn reports to Jess Gibbons, who's the Chief Operations Officer.
Thank you very much.
So just going back, as I say, the bin situation was a legacy Bournemouth decision. I believe it was made at the time by the then portfolio holder, Councillor Wyman Green. I think it was at the time, it was against officers' advice, but that was the dictation at the time. My understanding was, and still is, that the properties around Churchill Gardens are made up of quite a number of HMOs.
There are a few,
Yeah, and
I wouldn't say there's a huge amount. There are other types as well.
I'm just relaying to you what I know. So, because of the number of HMOs, each council taxpayer is entitled to a quantity of waste disposal, if you like, a metre each, and that's worked out and delivered to every resident throughout BCP. I think the view of the council at the time was that the number of bins that needed to be provided to every resident that was paying council tax was unaccommodatable within the physical infrastructure of the gardens. So what we ended up with was bin blight. Now, apart from the aesthetics of it, obviously they clog up pavements, and as a council we are not supposed to have bins on the pavement So people leaving their bins out, again, was causing problems. That was my understanding. Hence why they went.
I think if you look on Google Earth
Mhm.
or Google Street View,
Yeah.
there aren't that many. There are a few, but they could come around the bin day. But the problem now is we've got 38 of these metal containers blocking the roads. So you take away half a dozen bins that are left on the pavement. And I'm not saying these aren't a bad idea, these bins, they're just very poorly managed and very poorly organised.
Okay, well, I suppose what I'm here to listen to is the consensus that they want individual bins back.
I think a way forward for you would be to give individual people who want recycling bins, to give them their own bin.
Okay.
And I think if you got rid of a load of these bins, they had 3 bins on each side of the square, and you did daily collections. But I think because of your hazardous waste issue that goes into these bins, you need someone down to monitor them before the dustmen collect the rubbish. That's what I think. And I know that probably won't happen.
No, and I'll be clear, that won't happen.
But your problem is you've got asbestos in these bins on a regular basis
Yeah.
that your dustman cannot see because it's in the bottom of the bin, it goes in their dust cart, and that's a no-no.
Yeah, the reality is, and you're using your experience, but the reality is, people put things in their bins regardless of where they are. So
No, this
we
stuff is
get all
imported.
manner of.
This is imported into our area.
Yeah, well, okay, but I'm just
I
saying.
think one of the problems is with particular Churchill Gardens and these big bins is, I think there's a couple elsewhere, but they are pretty much, that's the only area with these big street bins, so they do attract, so people are thinking, where do I dump stuff? They're dumping stuff, you know, where I am, behind Remedia Lane, they dump stuff there where there's a load of bins out. We've got a couple of communal bins at, I think it's Springbourne Road, the name of the road, but mostly it's very highly condensed in Churchill Gardens, so it's attracting flighting. So people who live quite a way away might think, where do I get rid of my fridge? I'll just sling it over there, and builders and people like that who don't want to pay charges down the dump.
We get a builder every morning comes
Yeah,
around.
so
Sorry,
just
I know you're not trying. I think fly tipping is a problem across the whole area. Well, but you know, I live near Kings Park. There's fly tipping around there. Yeah, I'm not just chucking something in. One of the guys who work with lives in Manchester. They have a huge fly tipping. They've sorted it all out by giving every resident 2 free bulky waste collections. Right, you are.
But that won't.
No, I'm just
Yeah,
an idea.
yeah, I understand,
It's the right approach here,
Yeah.
but it's worked up there. And
So,
they've solved it, apparently.
well, the national statistics would say it hasn't.
Okay.
Manchester is still,
Yeah.
receiving a prolific amount of fly tipping. Most fly tipping is linked to organised crime. Believe it or not,
Okay.
the disposal of waste is,
Yeah.
the gentleman has said, has prolific costs attached to it. Jobbing builders and all the other sort of guys, they will pay somebody to take it away, or they'll do it themselves. Okay. There are 2 things that are, the government are looking to pass. One is that DIY waste will no longer be chargeable at household waste recycling centres. So that may affect some of those builders that try to fly tip it rather than dispose of it appropriately. The other thing is, very rarely does a resident go along and drop a bag of fly tipping.
Oh, I don't agree with that, because I basically work in social care, and I had a client where we would, for about a year and a half, we were doing that area of Walpole Road. And I mean, the gentleman's right, I mean, it's fly tipping on steroids. I mean, there's even people they're even dumping stuff on pallets there, you know. I mean, it just, but basically, the local residents, the stuff being, because we have to, because it's through Dorsey Devils, we got the say-so to pick up stuff and put in the bins. But when you see what's put in the bins by, I'm not saying fly tips, ordinary residents, there's thousands of pounds worth of decent stuff being chucked in the bin, you know, towels, clothes, shoes, you know, so there's also an issue.
That's house clearance stuff coming to the areas, the bins are on the corner, it's easy to put your van up and dump the house clearance in your bin.
Well, I hear what you say, but I mean, having seen it being put in there, I would say that the local population is chucking away a lot of decent stuff as well, you know, so that doesn't help.
Sorry.
Yeah, well, just ask a question about enforcement. Ralph mentioned wise guys, obviously doing enforcement.
There are a lot of councils that use mobile cameras for enforcement. In fact, I was reading about one today, I think it was Woking Council. Why do you not do that?
There are mobile, there is a mobile.
Because the council clearly has access to
Yeah,
mobile
so
cameras.
there are, but
So
whether
why do
they're
we not-
used for that purpose and, you know, getting it to be there at the right time, the nature of cameras.
Well,
are
could
that
they
people
not be
see
put
a
up
camera
in
and they
addition?
don't do the crime.
Could they not be put up and left in a position for a number of
Yeah.
months, as they are in other places around?
Would it not even be worth just trying it once?
Yeah,
Okay, well,
it's
if
terrible.
I can address these things and then we can go from there.
Could I just raise one point quickly? I live on the corner of Walpole Road, Borthwick and Churchill. I understand what Ralph's saying, or something happening all the time, people that do it. The people you mentioned right at the beginning and given us the status of the third most deprived ward, you know, the Kelly-Attensalls and the people who sort of crush the data. 13% of the people who live Walpole Road, thereabouts, Palmerston Road, St Clements, 13% every year are transient. So what Dave said about people lobbing their stuff out of there, it's from all sorts. Fretting about how it's getting there seems a waste of time. We've been doing it for years, one way or another. I'd be interested to talk about the remedies that people have got in mind. I've got a small one, but I'll save that for another time. But rather than going around trying to proportion blame, and tomorrow we'll have another bags of valuable stuff, rubbish. So, you know.
Well, I think your perspectives and your ideas are just as important as what we can come up with, because it does start with.
We haven't come up with anything so far.
Well,
We've had
I know.
hundreds of hours of talking about this subject, the people who live around the square.
We can just, propose back on, but when we had this meeting last year, we was talking, the remedy was they were gonna send in the wise enforcers. I mean, I don't know what the statistics are and whether that's had any effect, but it doesn't sound, I don't expect it has really, suddenly no one was that surprised, I think.
Why is this largely around fixed penalty notices, and it's about catching somebody in the act. As you know, I think when they see a uniform there, they're not going to
cameras.
commit a crime.
Other councils use mobile cameras,
Yeah.
why not we?
Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah.
Let me just
Yeah.
come to this. So, fly tipping on a commercial scale, which is what's been suggested here, is the type of materials that people are dumping, so asbestos, if it is indeed asbestos, and other hazardous or what they call difficult waste. That is the role of the Environment Agency. Okay, so the Environment Agency have an enforcement team whose principal job is to tackle large-scale organised fly tipping. They are the people that issue businesses with their waste carriers licences, with they monitor their duty of care and various other things, which are all, you know, legal requirements for businesses to operate. And if they don't dispose of their waste responsibly, then they're in breach of that, and they can face significantly more fines than somebody like Wise can dish out. So I think one of the things, having listened to this, is I would suggest that we will contact the Environment Agency to see if they can support us. What they can do that we can't is they can put in covert cameras. I won't go into the legalities of it, but just putting a camera there covertly is a big deal, and you can't just do it without good cause. And you know, we can't just put cameras up all over the place.
I understand that, but from what Ralph has said and what we said a year ago, people were saying the same thing. I would have thought this, it's justifiable. There's more than enough evidence there to do it. Other councils are doing it. They're successfully prosecuting people. I was reading about one today, so it shouldn't be on the wit of man to be anything. So this is a hotspot area. It's been going on for years. I don't know how many times I've seen years
Pictures, photos.
being posted stuff where people
Being a right nuisance, a lot.
yeah, vehicles, people getting out, dumping stuff. Those people should be caught. Camera evidence is there. Prosecution. Send the right message. It's easy.
My issue
we
with
should
you
be
lot is asbestos in your bins, and you allow your workers to tip it in the dust cart without any, you know about this, you're told when the asbestos is there, and yet this asbestos goes in your dust cart with your workers, and then you take it to a recycling centre. They're not your workers, and no responsibility for this stuff, and they got to empty that dust cart at the tip. So that's my big issue, is this asbestos.
Okay, so
And then council workers come along and say, no, it's not asbestos, it bloody is.
Well,
I know it is.
well, I think you just said that in order to
You know,
ascertain
if
whether
you
it
have
is
these
or it isn't.
bins, unless you do something about these bins, this situation will go on, and you're putting your workers' futures on the line. And that's wrong, man. That is so wrong. That is so wrong.
If I may, Chair, I think it's a good suggestion here to get involved with to encourage the Environment Agency to look at this because they seem to have more powers. I think what needs to be done as well, because this is a very valid concern, because I was actually there as one of the councillors that Ralph came down and saw the workers turn up because I put this through to the highest level I knew to ensure that it was treated properly as suspected asbestos. The complaints procedure has failed this particular resident, and I helped him write the complaint because I witnessed what was happening to our operators of the council. It is not their job, to be all savvy. If there is from the HSE a procedure where there is suspected waste and it's cross-contaminated, it's there in legislation, and I would hope and trust that you will notify the HSE at the same time the Environment Agency as you're talking about enforcement and catching some of these scrubs that are blighting. Never mind the blight of bins, blighting this particular area, this particular community, and speak to them and say, this is where our procedures as a local authority have possibly failed our staff and have certainly failed our residents. Because it is not something which I think the community here can accept being, well, we'll look into it and we'll explore ways, etc. We need to have some very positive action to actually how to stop it, because it is now endemic. It is daily, and the evidence is there. So from your perspective as a very senior councillor, and with the support of the political side of things, then if we are going to speak to the Environment AG for enforcement, then I think we should be looking at our own protection for our own staff that may well be handling hazardous waste unknowingly.
Sorry.
Just respond to that.
So I think, fine, we'll undertake to talk to the Environment Agency to gain their support for reflecting the organised waste of these subjects. Just to be clear, when a crew has suspicion that the waste is hazardous to health, they are supposed, and I can't categorically say every time, but they are supposed to phone into the office. We have a contract in place to deal with hazardous waste. It's a certified contractor.
The last lot I found, I told the dust, I went around these bins a couple of weeks ago. I haven't done it this week because I haven't been well enough to do it. I haven't been here a lot. I found some asbestos in the dustbin, right? I told the crew, don't empty that, it's got asbestos in it. It went in the back of the dust cart. I told them. You know, there is no excuse. You cannot have these bins and do this. You are breaking the law.
Would you have me supervise them every
Well, I'm sorry,
collection?
you're breaking the law. It's here, black and white.
Ralph, I think you've made it really clear.
Yeah.
You're breaking the law.
Well,
You cannot do this. You're affecting your workers' futures.
They probably haven't got time. They're probably so much
It's
up
not the
against
point.
it. They
It is
probably
not
haven't.
the
I know.
point. This is hazardous waste.
Oh no, you're correct.
They should
but
not be
I'm
putting it in a
just
dust
saying.
cart.
No, you're
Yeah, we
correct.
just-
But they workers probably haven't got the time.
That's not the point.
They
Can we
probably,
just let
Can
Gavin
I
down a
quickly
second?
ask,
Let me
what was
just
there
wait.
before those, how long have those been there in the corner? What was there before? Why did it get, I know you said it already, but
Maybe
could you not go back to what it was
yes,
before?
What we had before, you said earlier that this was a 6-month
Ralph gave us the history of
I mean, I know that when I go to Brighton quite a lot, that Brighton has these bins, we have them spread across the whole area, you know, that they're everywhere you go. You know, here in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, we have, you know, high concentration in one area, you know, one very, very small area and nowhere else. So this is part of the reason why these bins are getting full of not just, you know, asbestos, because it's incredibly bad, but other stuff is bad as well.
Yeah.
And these people have to deal with this. So maybe, you know, is there, surely the council should be going now to talk to the residents again, saying that we want to, you know, they never wanted it in the first place. And if you're right about that was against officers' recommendations at the time, I don't think you mentioned it.
I have to say, that's what I gleaned from.
And perhaps really that needs to be re-evaluated. Either we need bins across the whole area, or we need to re-evaluate.
The point is what's in those bins. It's not the bins. What goes in there. It says here, council workers are not allowed to clear these bins. It's that you've got to get a licensed contractor in They don't do this, they sling it in the back of a dust cart. You won't see asbestos in the bottom of the bin if it's full of rubbish, you won't see it. So it goes in the dust cart and off it goes.
Yeah, we
You won't see
understand
it.
that, we understand that, but so asbestos is very serious and they should deal with that.
They
If
can't.
there's so much asbestos going in these bins, there's gonna be, permanent, massive cost to the council to
Well, that's
deal
their
with that
problem, isn't it? They
properly.
want
Yeah,
these
it is.
bins and they've got to
So
do it
perhaps,
right.
perhaps, yeah, but they want the bins, but perhaps that, that they might not want that bit, those things. So really, I mean, what I'm asking is, going forward, is the council, are they willing to go and talk to the residents and actually, maybe change them back to the way they were before? I mean, I know that part of the reasoning to get rid of them was because they wanted to beautify the area, they had these grants to go and reinstall gardens, wasn't it, and balconies and things. And they felt that it was unsightly having these bins, that's what
Well, it looks
I
even
think
worse
is the
now.
real,
With
is the real
all those bins don't look
driving
good.
force behind it.
Look
So
awful.
I think we need at least two things. One is clearly if we need the Environment Agency to help us, we need to catch and stop some of these people. But it's going to recur if we have those communal bins. I think we do need to have conversation with respect to Ralph, to all his neighbours and that whole area to understand what the community want. And then obviously it'd be down to Ian and the team to work out whether we can deliver it and how we deliver it and how we make that better.
We are a year on from when we had a conversation a year ago where we are gonna enforce this and we're gonna make this happen.
I'm sorry, yeah, it wasn't with me.
But, that's what happened, and it's not been very successful a year later now, so now it's time to reevaluate. So really it'd be a good idea to quite quickly get some sort of timescale so we can follow it up as a forum and that local residents can have an idea, when things might improve.
Yeah, I mean, it's not my area, but I am a director at VCP Council, and I share your concern in terms of the impact on staff. I just wanted to know, how well are our staff, I know they're up against it in terms of the rounds and the timescales, but how well have they been trained in identifying it, not dealing with it,
They
but identifying
They haven't.
it? No, well, I'm just asking the
I've
expert.
seen this, I've checked this out already, I've been watching them, how they do it.
Is
There's
the
a lot of it.
potential, let me finish, is the potential for us to refresh that knowledge so that in the interim, before a solution is formed, we actually are safeguarding the staff from that?
So the rounds are carried out by bin operatives, and they're not trained, but they don't look, they're told not to look in the bin because, it's too time consuming, but also, it's an unpleasant, what goes into the bin is unpleasant. So, but if they suspect there is, asbestos, let's stick with that one, asbestos, then they are supposed to notify their supervisors who have been given asbestos awareness training, okay? And whether it's to the degree of,
It's just the asbestos awareness course online anyway to do it.
yeah, but that's, all you need at that point is the suspicion. And if they then decide that is actually asbestos, they will pull the contractor out. And that's what they should do.
That doesn't happen.
I'm just
So
going
you're
to
telling
ask
me,
how
but-
often
but
does it happen?
up until this point, I wasn't aware of that.
So that's something that we can progress, that we can find that you progress, that we can follow it up. What's the timescale for getting
Well,
some
the key-
feedback about?
The key to this is trying to arrest the fly tipping problem. I'm sure the residents of Churchill Gardens aren't putting prohibitive items in their bins, but you can't rule that out.
So there might be some main priorities to get down to be coming in.
But what I'm trying to say is, if somebody puts something at the bottom of the bin and then everybody just fills it up, nobody's the wiser on it, until it gets to.
So these bins are overflowing onto the street, they've got fridges sticking out, the photos we've seen on a daily basis are pretty poor. It's not really working for the area, in terms of beautifying the area,
It's making it into a rubbish dump.
making it into a rubbish dump,
Yeah,
it's
it's a
doing the
rubbish dump.
opposite.
So I said, we're an illegal council waste transfer station.
But you're looking at the sort.
Yeah, we are.
More
We
out
are.
the back and then I'll say.
Yeah, can I totally acknowledge Churchill Gardens has this situation really badly. I've noticed, I don't know how long we've been there, but around the Carnarvon Road Square, which is like the one down from Churchill Gardens, just off Christchurch Road, there's communal bins being put there, the exact same bins. Now, I've had occasion to park there a couple of times recently. I previously knew the area very well because I had friends that So I know historically it's not been as untidy. And when I've parked there in the last few weeks, each one of, I haven't looked in the bins, but each one of them has rubbish, had broken furniture next to one, and, you know, obviously the contents of a black bin bag spilled out on another one. So despite the council having had their attention drawn constantly and frequently to the problems in Churchill Gardens, they have fairly recently, I don't know how long ago, but within knowledge of the problems, have decided to put more of those bins in Boscombe. And I suspect they'll be getting exactly the same problems as Churchill Gardens.
I mean, how often have you been just emptied? Is it a weekly?
My understanding is they're being lifted now 3 times a week.
In Churchill Gardens 3 times a week, yeah. I put that forward, I went to a meeting at the Stuart Best at the time, and it went on for a bit, but we eventually agreed 3 times a week. It's €114 bins a week we have of rubbish. That's just pathetic, it's just not right. We don't need that.
How many litres do these bins contain if we're allowed a litre of rubbish?
So each household is allowed a 240 litre recycling thing, 140 litre black bin residual waste, and I think it's a 15 litre food waste. Okay.
Could I make a suggestion? Maybe if the council were to allocate a specialist officer who knows what he's looking for, and maybe they made ad hoc visits 3, 4, 5 times a week, and did a survey of what is being there, and then over a period of time we could. Because I don't think, you know, your description of the park and that area with mostly people living in family homes.
I didn't
is
say
quite
that.
right.
No, I didn't
I'd
say
say
that.
the majority is HMOs, as your data says.
So
When so many people come and go,
There's lots of houses with 2 or 3 flats in, they're not HMOs.
there's some with 6.
Yeah, there are, they would be an HMO.
I tell you what,
They're the ones that
That's
change.
another question over here, maybe we can just get the response.
I think we can engage with the health agency. I think there's sufficient grounds to encourage them to participate in that commercial flight tipping as to be concerned with. I think there's some consultation that we can do, engaging with residents about what the preference would be. But I think what we've got to understand is we can't have 20% of one, and it's just too difficult. So we go with one solution or the other.
It's gotta
That's
be
the
one or
other
the
thing.
other.
And the third thing, I take to this gentleman's suggestion, whether people agree or not, the figures tell us it's a high percentage of HMOs, and that resident population is transient. And as a consequence, English is not always their first language, so we perhaps need to look at that and how we might educate people to do the right thing.
So with
Could
that,
I just contribute a short point, a very short point? I just looked up on gov.uk, from the 10th of July this year, the fine for fly tipping has gone up from £400 to £1,000. Can't you put a sign up, which won't cost very much, where this fly tipping is endemic, and that might put people off?
It's already on the bins. Every bin has got a sign on it.
Maybe something a bit more prominent, a bit more eye-catching.
The new amount on it.
I don't know, it's not saying there's cameras in the area, you get fined.
Just get another question over here.
Do they know it's £1,000?
My name is Patrick Callaghan, I'm the council for Boscombe West. So I report the stuff pretty much every day, not just in Churchill Gardens, but throughout the world. So these bins are not just a problem in Churchill Gardens, they're a problem elsewhere in Boscombe West. The fly tipping is a particular problem in Churchill Gardens, there's no doubt about that. But the issue that I think Ralph is raising, it's not for him, and it's not for your staff to determine whether or not that stuff is asbestos. The issue is, do we suspect it might be asbestos? And if we suspect it might be asbestos, there's a clear procedure to be followed.
Yeah.
Now, I can't do any more than tell the Director of Environment that I take the lift photograph and I think this stuff is asbestos. Can you please get a specialist contractor to take it away? And then the next day, Ralph phones me up and said, that stuff's gone in the back of the dust can.
Yeah, but again, so what we have are people that are trained to recognise that.
You can get hold of ACL in Poole, they will come out on an emergency basis and they will check your dustbins whenever. They will do a test, a laboratory test, and tell you whether it's asbestos or not. Don't get me, you need someone who knows what they're doing that can do the test. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
The point is, we have people who should be identifying it, and if they perceive there to be a risk, they will invoke that. There is a contract in place to take that
Yeah,
responsibility.
what's being said, those are local councils here, are saying that it's not actually happening, that these people are maybe even coming.
Yeah, and I think that's the bit that I need to go back
So we need
and have a
to
conversation with.
get a follow
If I may, Chair, I just want to challenge one thing that you said there, Ian, is that we've heard the progression of the story of going to the communal bins. We understand the reasons between the housing mix and, you know, the nature of, you know, the transient community and so on and so forth. I would challenge you to say why it is that we've gone from one collection to two collections to three collections a week in two ways. The first one, if you're having three collections a week of 38 odd bins,
€114 bins a week.
140 euro bins, you know that there is the evidence that you require that there's more being produced than the local neighbourhood can produce. So that's given. However, if you've increased to three collections a week, I would challenge you to understand why it is that there couldn't be a separate collection for those that have their own personal bin. Because you said we can't have a mix of 80-20, because it has to be all of one or all of one of them. For the community in this particular case, because we have an identified fly tipping hotspot, we have an issue to fix, the community and the residents are suffering. If you can give a solution, even if it's an extra round, for those that have their own bins, then that cuts down on the amount of bit of rubbish from the local community that's going into those bins, or they can't get into the communal bins, which is one of the points that Ralph raised. So I would challenge you in your mindset to not go in with a preset solution, because the community, on the consultation that Andy's offering, might well say, for my house, which is one of many, I would want my own recycling bin, I want my own bin. I don't want to be a communal bin. And you may actually find that a mixed solution in this particular community, in this particular square, hotspot fly tipping, is acceptable. So that's the only thing I'll challenge you on that one.
I'd say one more question, and then we're going to have to move on to the next subject.
Can I just offer a solution in a minute to this problem?
Okay, we're going to take one more
Yeah, of course,
question.
yeah,
You'll say that we're going to probably call that into a whole. But obviously there is obviously a lot more fly tipping going on around Boscombe, which we've not got to, but it's good that we've got our local councils here, and they will push those into the right departments and further discussion.
Just quickly then, is it possible to gather evidence from people's doorbell cameras?
I'm not an expert on prosecutions of that.
It's not about prosecuting, you're saying about just work out who's doing it.
Possibly. I mean,
Because I
I don't know the answer to
Ralph's
that.
taken photographs of the vans with the registration on it.
The council don't get prosecuted. They don't get prosecuted. My point is this. They don't get prosecuted. I know they don't. I take loads of photos, I can admit, no one gets prosecuted. Right, the solution, and I've offered many solutions to this problem over the year. I think possibly the best solution so far would be is if everybody who wanted to recycle, I've said this already, had their own recycling bin, and you had 3 or 4 bins on each side of the square, off the corners, not on the corners because it's easy for people to fly tip, and then they were emptied every day.
I don't think that's feasible.
Well, fine, then that's fine.
You know,
It's the only way you'll solve
every
this
day
problem.
is,
Yeah,
you know,
that's what they do in
way
Europe with these
over
bins.
above what-
That's what happens in Europe with you.
It's going to
So
Europe,
can I-
I
can
go
I-
to France, because every day they.
I know you want to close it. I'm very much listening to everything that's been said. I think we need to come up with solutions. I've got a few ideas, and I just need to blend through Ian rather than just theorise on the spot with everybody here. But I think we absolutely need to look after ourselves in terms of asbestos. We absolutely need to look after the residents in Churchill Gardens and in Cavendish Square and in other places that Patrick and George are calling in. I haven't seen any of this because it's never come to me before. So I'm absolutely listening to what you're saying. We will come back to a future
So as a
forum.
forum, can we contact, who's the best person to contact, you or to both of you to maybe get a follow-up within a month or 6 weeks, just to sort of have an idea of what's going on, so we could get.
You're welcome to come back to me. Yeah, that's fine. And I'll
Yeah.
check it.
We can do that, but once you'll be in contact,
One other thing I've started doing, I haven't actually been going to the council anymore about asbestos. When I said going to the dust cart and commercial recycling, that's where the dust cart goes to empty, and let them deal with the council. it probably have more effect on the council than me just speaking to them ignoring me and sleeping back of dad's car. That's what I've been doing recently.
Okay, right, thank you very much, Ralph Grundy, for
Thank you.
making a
Thank you.
statement, and thank you to Councillor Andy as well, thanks very much. And we're going to move swiftly on to another hot topic. The sound will be working. We've got one of our speakers today is coming in through the internet. So this is an update. I'm going to be handing over to okay, so Andrew Ardley from South West Train, Julian McLaughlin from Council.
I'm the Director of Infrastructure.
So this is an update on refurbishment of Pokesdown Station. Obviously we covered this about a year ago as well. Everything's got very quiet. It's got very quiet over that year, so we were a bit in the dark. We do have a statement from the MP, which we'll read out afterwards.
Yeah, I'll read that out and Andy and Judy.
So I'll just hand you over.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Okay, so Tobias sent a statement. He's not able to be with us this evening. He asked if this could be read out before Andy and Julian do their presentation. My apologies that I cannot join you at this community forum meeting this evening. Ironically, I could not get down fast enough after completing parliamentary business today. I'm pleased that we're finally making progress, as I've been working with residents groups on improving accessibility since 2015, with issues such as funding, site inspections, metal fatigue, all causing frustrating delays. In January of this year, I raised the question of station upgrade in Parliament, and the Transport Minister was able to confirm plans to both upgrade the station entrance, platforms, bridge and lifts. And I'm pleased to see work has now begun. The total budget was confirmed at 5.7 million, with BCP Council committed to 2.6 million and South West Railway Network Rail pledging 3.1 million. Having met with South West Railways and Network Rail this week, I understand the new lifts cannot be placed in the old shaft location, but plans are afoot to locate them at the top of the stairwells. At my meeting, I stressed the importance of this project staying on timetable for completion next year. I will soon be meeting with AFC Bournemouth to rekindle discussions about the possibility of placing some of their large billboards around the platform walls to offer the station a sense of character and connection with our local football club. On a related note, I'm aware that there's been concern about South West Train's proposed ticket office closures. This will class Pokesdown Station as a Category 3 station with at least one staff member. I have spoken with SWR about my concerns over reducing staffing numbers for this station, given its sensitive history. SWR has assured me that if the proposed ticket office changes go ahead, staff members will continue to be present and available around the station. Apologies again for not being with you in person. I look forward to hearing any feedback from the forum. Thank you, Tobias Elwood.
Okay.
Over to you, Andrew.
Right, okay, yes, so just to introduce yourself, so I'm Andrew Ardley, I'm the Regional Development Manager for the West and South Western Railway. Some of you might have been here last year when I did an update on it then.
And I'm Julie McLaughlin, and I'd like to thank you for the tea last year. Because when I arrived, I had a tea and 2 biscuits, as I've done today. But then the Queen died, and I was on emergency planning duty, so I had to leave before. So I never saw his presentation, but I'm sure you do. I'm the Director of Infrastructure at BCP Council, so I'm here to answer any questions related to the Council's position on the project. I'm the Senior Responsible Officer for this particular project, and we have our board meetings only to update on the progress that Network Rail and South West Rail are making. And we have somebody online, who's Omar Belli. Do you want to, can you hear me?
Can you hear us? Can you speak? I might be able to hear you. Try.
Yes, I can speak. Good evening, everyone. I hope you had a successful evening so far.
Andrew's going to lead on the presentation. I'm here to answer any questions you might have related to PCP Council's position and Omar's and background as well.
Okay, right, fingers crossed it all works. So I just wanted to just give you a quick background of what we're going to try and do tonight. Because I'm going to have to go about 10 tonight, I've got a train to catch, so hopefully we'll get all the questions. But this won't take too long in terms of the actual, how much time we need to speak. So what I'm going to do is just give you a quick reminder of how we've got to where we are. So we've got quite a long and complex history, and not everybody was necessarily here last year to hear that. We'll give you an update on what's been happening since this time last year. We'll give you a position on exactly where we are with the latest design work, and then the timescales we expect on moving forward. So I won't go through this in massive detail because a lot of you have seen this before. But just a quick reminder, and some of you will remind me about this, I'm sure, when we get to questions. So yes, the lifts were a franchise commitment back in the original franchise in 2017. It took quite a long time to be able to get safely into the lifts back in 2019 to do proper inspections. And that then at that point, that showed we had some issues with the existing lift shafts. So at that point we had to go back to the DFT, where our obligation is to, and say there are some issues and then we need more time to look at the options. So we had another report done in 2020 which then came up with what we think were two viable potential options. We also looked at the option at that point of the completely demolishing the whole bridge and existing lift shafts and putting brand new bridge and lift shafts up, but that was rejected on the basis of the cost at the time. Then of course we had COVID hit, and that meant we had a complete change in our relationship with government. So we were then, our franchise was formally terminated, so all the previous contractual commitments were written off, and we started a brand new agreement with DFT. So we went through a range of different emergency contracts, and then we eventually ended up in a new two-year national rail contract. So at that point we had to completely reset where the obligations were and what we were expected to do with the lifts. So we had to renegotiate with DFT what we were going to do. So at that point, we knew it was going to cost more than the original sum that was set aside to do the lifts. So, but we managed to convince DFT that we should continue the obligation to put some funding into that. DFT came back and said, yes, we agree with that, but we need some extra third-party commitment funding to bridge the likely gap. So we then went through that process, where you remember, Tobias Elwood got involved, and there was a lot of discussion with the council, and we got to the point eventually, having been through a lot of discussions, costings, the council then got to the point where it formally approved its £2.6 million contribution up to 2.6 in January 22. So we then had to formalise that process with DFT. Don't forget, we were still coming out coding different contracts at that point. So we then had DFT then approved SWR's contribution, which is the 1.6. Okay. So that allowed, we then took the decision at that point that Network Rail were best placed to actually take work forward, because they do a lot of these schemes, which I can say a bit later. There's quite a few schemes going on around the network at the moment that are quite similar to this one. So it was decided Network Rail would take over the design of the scheme and the construction of the scheme. So we went through a process. We had to get contracts sorted out with Network Rail. Network Rail had to get contracts sorted out with designers, and that led to us to a point where we Network Rail awarded their contracts to AECOM, who designers back in February this year. So that's just a very quick potted history. It's quite a long. It's a long few years. I appreciate that, but it gives you a feel for how we got to where we are. So the current position. This is probably where you're most interested in. So we started out with the preferred option being using existing lift shafts. We've done this option work on different options, but we knew we had to do some extra work to be absolutely sure that was deliverable. And don't forget, we're dealing with both a bridge and lift shafts, which are nearly 100 years old. They were built in the early 1930s. Until the designers got in and did some much more detailed testing, we didn't know whether that option was going to be deliverable. After about a month or two, it became pretty clear that option wasn't going to be viable. The main reason for that, and we couldn't know this until this extra work was done, was that the depth of the existing foundations isn't strong enough to take the weight of new passenger lifts. And don't forget, these lifts were never actually passenger lifts, these were always actually goods lifts, and they had to meet new modern current standards. And they looked at, spent quite a bit of time looking at different ways of doing it, but ultimately the equipment you needed to get in there just wasn't, the site wasn't big enough to be able to get the piling rigs you need to be able to construct using the existing lift shafts. So, back in the early summer, we took the decision jointly to say that option is just not going to be viable. We could try and spend a few more months trying to find a solution, but that would need both more time and more money. So, we took the decision with BCP, with Network, with DFT, that the best option was to go for the other parallel option we had as a backup, which was constructing new lift shafts next to the existing bridge. So, if we see these blue locations, these are the proposed locations for the new lift shafts. These 2 points here, those are the 2 existing lift shafts. The proposal would be, at the moment, those would stay where they are, particularly the one that's next to the station building, because structurally that is all tied into the station building. So whilst it would be nice to be able to demolish them and get rid of them, that in practice is probably not going to be doable, although it might be possible to take the one out on the opposite side of the station. But at the very minimum, we would be looking to repaint or reclad the existing lift shafts so they didn't look out of sight in terms of the rest of the station. So where we are right now is that detailed design work's been progressing for several months now on this new option, and hopefully Omar won't keep me virtually under the table. So the meeting we've had yesterday was quite positive. I don't think there's anything too significant in terms of concerns at this stage. So there's the thing to bear in mind. This is a combined project of the new lift shaft, but also the bridge has to be refurbished as well. You can't do one without the other. So we have to look at this as one scheme, so we're getting to a point where we're fairly confident that this scheme is deliverable in this new location. So this is probably the bit we're most interested in, is what happens next. So within the next couple of months, probably towards the end of October, early November, we should have complete confirmation that this scheme is deliverable, and most importantly, we should also get a headline cost. And that's the really crucial bit, because it's one thing being able to say we can deliver the lifts, it's another thing that we can definitely do it within the cost, within the budget. So that's the critical no-go point in say a couple of months' time. There's obviously, perhaps we'll come back to what happens if it's not, but hopefully it will be. But the critical thing is that we have to be sure that it's reasonably within the budget, otherwise you can't go to the next stage. But let's assume it's within the budget and we can move forward. So what would happen next is we would then go to a point where we now then tender for the detailed design and construction work. That would take place, the detailed design, by the time we've been through the tendering process and the contract process, that would probably start around about March next year. That would take until roughly to October next year, at which point we'd be in a position to start on the site. If that all goes fine and everything's predicted, then we would hope to be completing the scheme in mid 2025. So in terms of funding, just to remind you where we are with funding, so SWR's 1.6 is secure. We've paid that over to Network Rail. They are using that at this moment to do the current design work. It will also pay for the rest of the detailed design work, assuming we get to that stage. Network Rail have got 1.5 million available. Its first call is for repairs to the bridge, and that includes a complete repaint. So it's got to be got into a condition where it can last at least another 20 So they've set aside 1.5 million for that. Now, if it doesn't need all of that 1.5 million in terms of repairs and repaint, then that will agreed any balance of that can be put towards the part of the scheme that is the lifts. And then BCP's contribution is up to 2.6, so they're the funder of last resort in essence, and so BCP would cover the remainder of the cost up to 2.6, and that is in the authority's capital programme as we speak. Just sort of to follow on from that, and once we take questions in a minute, so you might be aware, you might have heard that the council's also secured 70,000, 75,000, I think it is, from our Customer Community Improvement Fund. And that money is not for the lifts, that's very specifically to look at further improvements to the station building, because we're very conscious one thing to put lifts in, but the rest of the station needs a bit of improvement as well, especially when you need to think about, it's not, you know, getting people with wheelchairs arriving, how do they arrive, where do they wait, it's not particularly attractive station up on the street level at the moment, and the station building is looking a bit sorry for itself. So the council will be set to agree with us, the SWO will commission consultants to look at some different options for the station building. That will give us some options that are different, ranging from anything from complete demolish and rebuild on different footprints, which would create space for a forecourt, to a much lower cost solutions like just refurbishing the existing building. So what that'll do is it won't give you funds to actually build anything at that point, but it'll give you some options as to what they'll cost, what's deliverable, and then so when funds do become available from various whatever source it is, whether it's government or local funds, you'll be in a very good position to bid for those and hopefully secure some funding to complete the rest of the station. And obviously that would then be tied in with design for the lifts. So I think probably that's as much as I need to say at the moment, unless Julian wants to say anything else.
No, it's just really to reaffirm that there are two elements to this. One is the lifts, and as Andrew said, we don't know what the cost will be. I know, and Andrew confirms for other projects in the last year or two, for all sorts of external reasons, that costs are going up. You all know about that from a personal point of view as well, and this industry is no different. So at the moment we are in that limbo where we don't know the cost of the lifts, which was the crucial element of this project, and until we do in November, when we will have the board, and that board has delegated authority to make decisions on behalf of the council from my point of view, so I'm delegated to have that authority in consultation with the relevant portfolio holder. There are two ones in the room, and another one is on finance. So what we're waiting for with bated breath really is Omar's work on behalf of all of us in terms of defining that position, that outline, and then we can start to move forward. We've got scenarios here where we might be able to afford both, which is what the original budget was set out to do in terms of enhancements to the building as well as the bridge and the lifts. Or we find that there isn't enough budget because of rising costs, and that's a scenario we'll have to come up to, and it will depend upon how shortfall there is in terms of that aspiration to do the complete project. I'd be really annoyed and surprised, as I'm sure you would be, if we can't afford to do any of it with over £5 million of joint funding. So in terms of that, we need to know what the expensive part is, which is the lifts. We've got an alternative plan which seems sensible, and it will enhance the station for everybody to use into the future. It hasn't been possible for many people not to use that. So that's our key aim. But also, if it is affordable, but there's a shortfall, to try and do what we can to make the buildings better for use, but also to look aesthetically better. So that's the game plan. We don't know how much we can afford towards buildings, if any. I would hope there is some funding. If there is a shortfall, then I've made it clear that and the council made it clear at the agreement that it was up to £2.6 million and not any more. And it, as a last resort. So once the 3.1 is spent in its entirety or allocated, then the 2.6 clicks in as the last part of the payment. If that's not enough, then we will need to consider, and we'll probably have to go back to the council itself in terms of the next position, in terms to agree, do we lobby DFT, which would be my favourite position, and I'm sure that given what you said, that they're doing a lot of these things around the country, then actually it's DFT's position in terms of making that shortfall so the whole project works. I think BCP Council saved the day by coming in and supporting the shortfall previously, but I know from other meetings and things that we've got a slight shortfall in our own funding at the moment. And if I went to Andy for another million or whatever it is, it would probably be a no. So that's where we are at the moment. And through a lot of hard work, I know it's frustrating it takes so long, is the last point I wanted to make, but that's what happens with in the rail industry. It is complex. It has to be safe, whatever we do. It has to have an outcome that's positive. I don't know whether Omar wants to say.
Do you want to say anything, Omar?
No, thank you, Jay and you, Andrew. You said it all, like you said, here with managing the funds and managing projects team, and we also have a good consultant in ACOM to see us through the design stages, and also going out there and doing some cost estimates for detailed design and implementation. So like you said, November time will be when we go sit down. Okay, as you know, the project board meets very often, and we are at the end of the phone, and we can pick up and call and talk to each other, give updates as they come along.
Thanks very much. He's got a very small nose, too big now, isn't he? So, you're enormous on the screen now. Just so you know.
Well, it's technology, I don't know why.
Yeah, can I just ask, Andrew, I mean, obviously the focus over the last 12, well, nearly 12 and a half years of the campaign has been very much on the lifts.
Yep.
And obviously other bits and pieces have been added to that since, particularly in terms of refurbishment. All that's great, of course, we all want to see that. But I guess my main concern is the money is not going to be there for the lifts element of it. And I guess to Julian and to yourself, I mean, how likely do you think it would be that the DFT would make up the shortfall if we couldn't afford to put the lift in as part of that project? Bearing in mind it's been a focal point of the whole thing since the outset.
I mean, from my point of view, I'd be really, really disappointed if we can't afford to do the lifts on the platform in a new location, albeit, and to make sure that between the lifts, because the bridge is needed between the lifts, that that's safe and it's future-proofed effectively. They are old structures, aren't they? So you know that is costly. I'd be really disappointed if the current funds don't cover that. It's what's remaining and what our plans are. This is why we put in a bid for external funding, because we foresaw that there might be a shortfall. So let's cover the design through another bid, which is totally independent. So we've helped with that, but it's only 75k. So.
Well, the other thing I would say, obviously, our own MP Tobias Elwood's
Yes.
been involved in the campaign since the outset. We've
Absolutely.
raised it with numerous transport ministers down the years. So obviously the DFT know about Pokesdown Station. Jay Kelly and I, when I was councillor, presented a petition to the DFT, spent quite a bit of time outlining our concerns around Pokesdown Station. So it's not like, you know, they don't know about it. It's you know, suddenly a project that's arrived on somebody's desk. So I would hope that all we've done over the last 12 and a half years, and you know, there's a lot of people in this room that work damn hard, you know, that would count for something in the bidding process. And I, like you, I'd be really disappointed and quite angry to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, nothing came of it, because they've known about it for a long time.
They have. I mean, just to put it into context, firstly, so the 1.6 million SWI is effectively government money because our contract is basically all funded by government now under this new national rail contract. So that's just worth bearing in mind. The other thing I would say is that there's a lot of stations around the country that there's a new round what's called Access for All, which a lot of stations are doing. Some in this area. We've got bids in for Bournemouth, Dorchester South, Yeovil Junction, amongst a few. There's a lot of stations around this country and in this area that still haven't got level access to platforms. So you know, Pokesdown is very deserving, and nobody disputes that. But you're not alone. Omar's currently working on 7 schemes this year. seven schemes.
Through this year to take us through the
Yeah.
later part of next year.
So every 5 years, the government usually does this bidding round for Access for All. We've been really lucky. Some of those schemes that I was working on have been carried over from the previous 5-year period, but each of those schemes comes in anything between £3.5 and £5 million, and the vast bulk of that is government money. So government, and of course, there's about, I think it's about 300 million the government's spending this current 5-year period, something like that.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm sure DFT are very aware. They are on the Pokesdown board, so they are absolutely directly involved in this. But Pokesdown is one of many stations that needs this work. So we know what the financial situation is.
I think that's true. But as I say, bearing in mind obviously this campaign's been
Yeah.
12 and a half years,
Yeah.
you would hope that we're a lot further
Yeah.
up the list than maybe some others were.
And unusually, the DFT are on our board. We
Yeah.
made sure of
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
so they saw how it progressed, saw the effort being made, and also I would add, that Tobias has been very vocal on this, and he's also made comments. I can't release exactly what he said, but in terms of his intention to push this if we need him to help and support. So.
And we've actually had 2 transport ministers actually come down and look at Pokesdown Station for the DFT, so again, they know full well
Yes.
and they're for the campaign.
Can I ask, it's a similar question the other way around, and I was involved back in 2019 in some of the discussions, but I'm interested, if Homer's doing 7 of these, you must have a pretty good idea of the cost of bridges. So are we likely to end up with a shortfall? Are we likely to end up with that?
Okay.
I know steel price has gone up, but it seems to have gone back down. There's a whole thing about the supply chain and when you do it. What's the current cost?
I'll give an initial answer, and Omar can follow up if you want to say here. So, what is very apparent with each of these, they're all different. If you see the stations, some of the stations Omar's working on at the moment, they are all completely different, and some have got existing bridges, some need completely new bridges, others need modification, and the cost varies hugely between them. So, the difficulty we've got here is its location deep in a cutting, and the fact we've got nearly 100-year-old infrastructure we're trying to work with. So they're all they vary in rate. I mean, Omar, do you want to say? I think they're all coming in at that range of about 4 or 5 million, aren't they? Roughly, the ones you're doing at the moment.
They are more than that. I mean, you look at the simple ones and the ones that require the bridge span. So like ISO and Telecom, that. If you look at a typical one that requires everything is possible, and but again, like I said, where we are locational wise, access wise, also have cost build up in terms of possession, in terms of private land access that you need. For example, Bank Station, we've got a whole road to get us to the site, and we have commons where we've had to spend a bit of money for license for the period we're going to use that space, and then we also have ecology to look at. We're going to task us for a 30-year restoration period funding for that. We managed to turn our way out of it. So each site brings its own unique characteristics that we need to manage. And for here, what we have is very tight. The drainage, possession, services, various services like we just mentioned, the existing goods lift structure is critical to keeping everything else around it in place. So we need to be careful in methodology for and piling, etc. So all those things have their own costs. And then in the meeting today as well, when we looked at IDC IDR, we're looking at how we need to qualify a lift, so more like a bespoke lift that we need to put in there as well. So all those things do count for changes, derogation as well.
So yeah, the answer is they're all everyone is different. The good thing is we're not providing a whole new bridge, because that's obviously a big part of some of these schemes. We're going to provide a whole new bridge as well as the lifts. But as Omar says, there's a lot of bespoke elements to this scheme which will add to the cost. And as Julian said, inflation, materials have gone up considerably. But we're all keeping our fingers really, really crossed that it will come within the budget.
Thank
Thank you, and thank you for taking George and I through this earlier in the summer. So just to check my understanding, I'm getting the impression that from your discussions, the program updates, you don't have any particular reason to believe it's going to come to more than 5.7, but there is that risk. But you're kind of tentatively optimistic at the moment. Is that fair to say?
I
Or is
think
that too
we're
much?
confident. It's two different things. We're confident it's deliverable.
Mm-hmm.
So that until they've done a lot of this work over the last few months, we couldn't be reasonably certain it was actually deliverable. So as the previous option we decided wasn't. The cost we just really can't say at the moment until the first thing they have to do. They have to work through all the different elements of the design. Because as we were just saying, if there's a particular element that needs a lot of bespoke design and bespoke construction, that will put the costs up. So until they've completed that design work, you really just don't know. And then obviously the quantity survey will go through the design, each element of design, put a cost on, adds a bit of risk onto it, and then we'll get the answer. So none of us can say at this stage whether it's going to come in the budget or not. We're really hopeful it will do, but we just cannot really say.
Can I just follow up? So if it does come to more than 5.7, we're talking potentially years further down the line as having to go out for further bidding from DFT, etc. That's a potentially significant delay.
Worst case scenario, but if you see, it very much depends how much over we're talking about. If we're only talking, say under £500,000 or something like that, then hopefully there's a reasonable chance for 20 DFT, and you might be able to find a balance. If we start talking about much more than that, then obviously it gets much more difficult.
And at the last board, I tried to warm them up to the idea. I didn't get a sucking of teeth or any sort of nods that way. So they're aware of the position. I can't judge. I mean, these are the guys, the experts on rail. What I can say on civil engineering and road-based projects, which I oversee the whole piece of deconurbation, we have had significant changes due to inflation, due to supply in terms of the steel and that side of things, and just material. So, but that's varied between projects in our own area, between 20 to 40% increase. So what I do know is that our original estimates and assessment and budgeting for the 5.7 was prior to knowing all of these massive increases in inflation and material costs. So there was a contingency, but that's likely to be eaten up. So, yeah.
And then just one quick final question. Assuming it goes well and it does come under less than 5.7, what are the other risks to the timeline that you've given so far? What else could go wrong between now and it being completed?
Ronald, do you want to answer that one? Did you catch that?
Yeah, I got that. So we've got an interface with our upgrade right next door to the station. So we have they were in our meeting today, so they know what we're doing. So any interface work will be picked up. For construction, one of the things that really hits us when you start digging the ground. So those unknowns, so that sort of things that would put us at risk, and then we need possessions as well. So all those we can plan way in advance. But the critical issues is if, for example, our possession is only 52 hours or 72 hours or 100 hours possession, and we plan to actually do the main works. If the gas gets interrupted, so time-wise, that puts us out of sync. But some of the stuff we're trying to do early stage with the detailed design, we will try and carry out inclusive surveys that will allow us to do some drilling, considerable drilling in terms of where we intend to locate these shafts nice and early, so we can use that information early as well. Sometimes when we go out with the way our procurement is set up, we fail to carry out what we call intrusive surveys. At the very front end, the DFT will not give us money to do that, so we tend to meet issues on the ground, substructure works, only when we actually start doing the works, and that causes problem.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. And probably a question for Julian, and smart thinking to pull in 75 grand to can we have some more smart thinking in that way? And Andy mentioned Tobias's letter earlier, and I know Tobias is on side with this. mentioned about the Bournemouth Football Club sponsoring some boards. That wasn't the term used, but it's possible that we have other interests which we're not tapping into to sponsor. I think essentially my question is that if the lifts are viable and they can be afforded and they can go in, can we open up doors to perhaps access to all or other accessibility sort of pots and funds, etc., that could deal with the accessibility side of things for the front of the station itself, and open up some other pots and say, well, we've got 2 great lifts coming in. Yeah, it's going to give accessibility to this station for the first time since it was built in 1930 for all, but doesn't our population that has accessibility needs deserve, and the ability to drop off safely, for people that have got, adaptable vehicles for accessibility needs? Don't they deserve, it to be turning circles for, mobility aids and so on and so forth? So my question for yourself, Julian, is that at what point do we get the funds up that it's viable? Yeah, do we start actually knocking on the doors and saying, this is coming, yeah, wouldn't it be great to have this as well in combination? And maybe that takes some of the pressure off the overall 5.7 million budget.
So my answer to that is quite technical, in that I have a delegated authority to go so far for what was set out in the Cabinet and Council reports. So it's £2.6 million up to, as a last resort, for building that with all of these outcomes. The picture's changed, not just on cost, but actually the design has changed. So at some point I might have to go back to Council or Cabinet to confirm the position. Our game plan at the moment, as the Senior Responsible Officer, is to, in 2 months' time, know what the position is in terms of that cost and feed that back to the councillors on the board and make decisions in that respect. And I think you're right, there are potential parallels, not just to put all our eggs in one basket if there is a shortfall, to go and seek, cap in hand with Tobias's help, by the way, with DFT, but actually look at other alternatives. We've already done it once, as you say, and there might be other alternatives. What I would say on the flip side, unfortunately, is that a lot of those elements of funding that have happened and we've already secured have not increased with inflation. So the government have had very great difficulty in terms of funding all sorts of things because of COVID and because of all sorts of other inflation elements. So the funding for other pots are under pressure. So other programs that I'm running for far more money than these, over £250 million I think I'm overseeing at the moment, those are all under pressure because our costs are going up, but the funding is fixed. So the council, if they want to do all these things, has to put in more money, which it doesn't have, borrow more money, or de-scope some of them and bring it down to deliverable. So it could be that the plan of action, if none of those funds come to fruition or the timing's not quite right or whatever, because of the community push to get this done, is that actually we'd have to de-scope, we'd have to do it in different ways and work hard on that secondary element. I'm determined, there's nothing to do with me, that we will get there. And we, it's not up to me, it's up to these technical guys on rail that we have an affordable this and get on with that by 2025. But in the meantime, that gives us time to push for this other aspect. But you're right, there are other elements of accessibility for allowing people to gain entrance to the lift that we would need to sort out. We might get funds from different parts. So that is the intention. Go for it.
Probably got lots to say, so I'll try and keep it brief. I'll try and be negative as well. As you know, we've been in this campaign for a long time. We could have told you some of the things you said, how the lift shafts and previous franchise holders said.
Southwest Road.
Yeah, we are where we are. Anyway, one of the things we regularly come back to is communication. It's great up here, but I remember sitting here in a meeting several years ago saying, yeah, we'll have monthly meetings with you. And it's been agreed that never happened. And I understand you want the feedback to maybe one board, but the problem is I get asked all the time what's going on, and I haven't got a clue.
Yeah.
To what's, you know, it would be good to make, if there is a problem, to be aware of it and what's going on. I'm not saying a monthly meeting as such, but a monthly update with councillors.
Could that be done through George and Ellen maybe, or?
I think something.
Probably makes sense, wouldn't it, to all councils?
Well, seeing who would say.
I'll let Julian speak as well, but I think it very much depends what stage you're at in once we get to a point where we've got a scheme and we're starting to move towards construction, then I think the frequency of meetings quite likely would need to increase. We've got all sorts of things to think about at that stage. But the last few months, the last year, it would be no point because it's all very technical stuff. And we did
something come wrong the last year because timescales you gave us this one last year are different.
Yeah.
Now at the start,
and
the
some
two been
months-
asked me, I've gone, I think it's a big problem.
I
I think it really is. Now if there isn't, if you think there probably isn't, I can relay that, we can relay that, but people here think it's all gone wrong. Yeah, it's just communication.
Yeah. Do you want to come in? No, I think, yeah, I understand, but we, when there's things to say, we'll say them. If there's any queries in the meantime, we'll always, Julie and I will always respond to one of the councillors if there's a question, if we want an update, we'll give it. But there's no point in us trying to tell you things like we're drilling a hole, we're doing this survey, we're doing that survey, because it won't mean anything.
No,
so
I'm getting a bit, no, you're saying you won't give, all I'm saying is a regular update on how the project is progressing.
We could do that.
Because you can give the Boscombe Forum a regular update and push it straight out through our social media and our mailing list. And that would be
I
great
did
effective to communication.
campaign as well.
We might be saying no new news since the last one. At least you know, because then you're not worried.
That's all.
So we will follow up on that in November and once you
Absolutely.
If you've got one between now and November, I'll give you the input. There's no new news until November. Right? So, I've done it already.
Better already, isn't it?
I'm very much in favour of this. I mean,
we can improve in communication going forward now. I think November time is critical when we sit down to look at that discussion in terms of which is what we think it's going to cost us to have shortfall or not. But like Andrew said, design and design review and the constraints that we've looked at the moment is not telling us that present design option won't work. So that is technically we can deliver it, but we don't know how much we're going to deliver that for.
Okay.
So going forward, I think for updating, we can improve on that. I mean, we have a regular project board meeting, so we can use that as a benchmark to start of when it reach.
Yeah.
So people like myself who want to know whether where we are or not. I think that's it. Yeah. You just want to hear something.
Thank you. Okay, right, thanks for that.
Sorry, go back to the meringue at the base.
sorry, I didn't realise you were speaking. Yeah, the lifts are needed, the work needs to be done, but have you got any idea of what effect there might be on the disruption of the actual rail service? Because it is a vital link further into Dorset and down to Weymouth.
And to London.
And the other way, yes.
Do you mean during construction?
Yes.
You mean? Okay. Omar, you probably best to answer that one. I mean, most of the work will be done outside.
Most of our work will be done in a number of hours, and then we have engineering hours as well when trains are not running. And I think I used that word possession. We use the word team free, which is safeguarded working where, which in our timetable and program we have 7 times in a year, 2 or 3 times where trains are not running and we bus service, and we will try and program our works to match those periods. So we call them possessions. So our work will not go out of its way to stop normal timetable train.
Does that make sense? so
Yes.
there's possessions that happen for other pieces of work like track renewals and drainage roads, that sort of thing. Quite often the line between, say, Bournemouth and Brocknose might be closed for that sort of work at weekends.
Yeah.
So as Omar was saying, basically we'll do our utmost to do the work, any work that requires closure of the tracks during those when it's closed anyway. But there may be the odd occasion where we might have to do an extra weekend.
I mean, I live quite near to the railway, and I get the engineering notices, you know, because there's some very strange noises overnight sometimes.
Yeah. Okay. James, go back.
The problems with this station and its condition are, so the way I would put it is, they're a railway problem, they're a national infrastructure problem. So why is it that Bournemouth BCP Council, or should I say the council taxpayers, are contributing £2.6 million to this?
Well, I mean, it's a decision that's been made already, and all of the benefits of having that promoted to the council to help with the financial position effectively. But the report itself is online, and you can have a look at all of the detail. I haven't read it for over a year, so I wouldn't attempt to tell you exactly what was in there. I'm too old to remember things that well. But what I would say is that all of the benefits to the wider community were listed and gone into in terms of making that decision. It's councillors that make that decision. We put forward the benefits of doing that for the wider community. And hopefully, with the investment that's made on what is an operational element on the lifts and the access in, with that might come a better presentation of the station for future use. Now, what I haven't said is that which I should have probably said earlier, is that the intention and the policy position has moved on since that original cabinet report, and what we're intending to do through government as well as our own intentions is to push forwards with promoting rail as a sustainable method of travel along the east-west corridor, so for local trips, not for London to Weymouth trips or to London to Bournemouth, but actually for those people that are currently sitting in a metal box on their own in a bloody queue full of thousands of others that could actually just walk to the station. If it's attractive, if it's affordable, and it's used by many, then actually the price might come down. So there is a plan as part of policy to try and move forwards with the vision of actually doubling the rail frequency for local travel, with an investment elsewhere to provide the infrastructure to do that. And that's the vision that I have in terms of making life much better for people.
Just before we get on to something else, the other thing I would say is, and Omar will confirm this, virtually all the other access for all lift schemes that have been done in this area, pretty much around the country as well, virtually all of them have had significant financial contributions from councils, so this is not unique in any sense of the way.
It's not. You're right. Especially in the West.
And the reason why it's a lot is because of the cost of the scheme here is particularly different, so it's not unusual.
You kind of got to look your own backyard, and that's when you looked at Pokesdown Station. But what worries me, getting on from what you're saying, is I get on at Pokesdown, I'll go London. I go London, it's brilliant now, getting around London, but the rest of BCP, in Bournemouth.
What you mean stations?
Yeah. The
Access
underground
stations.
is good, amazing, but BCP is just absolute desert accessibility.
I mean,
on the rail station.
Yeah, to be even Bournemouth, technically. I can't use.
Yeah, no, understood. So
Even
Bournemouth
Station.
we have got a bid in for the lifts at Bournemouth. So we're very aware of that. We know there's some other stations in the BCP area that aren't fully accessible. And so there's a lot of those around the country. So it's the way the government does it. They've got a scoring criteria in this Access for All programme, which I won't go through in the detail of. And that's why, unfortunately, Pokesdown wouldn't be very high on that list at all, which is why we're to accelerate it to a different way. all the other stations are happy to have to go through that.
I'm not trying to butt in,
No.
but
It's a good point.
BCP is really
Yeah, no, totally understood.
you know, need something in the back of our mind. We've do this one. Sorry.
I need to go in about 5 minutes, so I can get this.
We've robbed you all. Thank you very much for your
Okay. Well, thanks very much to Julian, Omar, and Andrew for a very comprehensive talk on where the progress is so far. Thank you very much for setting up that fantastic bit of technology. I think it's the first time we had with anything like that. And like I said earlier, we'd love someone who knows about tech to come and join our steering group. Setting up some of these meetings could be a bit difficult for even me and others.
Right, I'll disconnect now. Okay, cheers.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, gonna go into any other business. Thank you, Andy, for taking that one. Do we have any other business?
I just wanted to raise a point. It's to do with the nighttime economy, basically, in Bournemouth, Boscombe East. I've had a request from a karaoke DJ. I know this is light compared to what we've been talking to, but Ross Allen Meslin. He's a karaoke DJ at Maroy's. Maroy's, I don't know how many people know about Maroy's, but basically, quite bravely during COVID in 2020, Mary and Roy started up the business Maroy's, took it over from Baxter's, and basically it's been a relative success. But what Ross is complaining about basically is the cut-off time for 11 o'clock for karaoke, and yet you can carry on dancing and listen to music until midnight, and he's questioning, is it possible to just have another half hour on the karaoke at Maroy's? So that's it. So.
That's a thing that probably is the licensing issue.
Well, it may be, yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me, Andy, thank you for answering my question in the summer about global ecological collapse. Based on what Dr. Matt Montgomery and the draft climate report that came out in February, is there any reason why council taxpayers can't have in their documentation when they get it a summary of how bad the situation is? Because we are losing a good-looking planet. We're losing, the gentleman referred to climate emergency, we're wiping out ecosystems at a rate of knots, and we've all got to act on this, and we're all kind of ignoring it because, oh dear, it's a bit much. But, is there any reason why we can't have just a little user-friendly thing? I did one on our 30th anniversary with my husband. In 2006 we went down the library with something I'd written. It was approved by the Friends of the Earth and done by the old Bournemouth Council. Can't we just have a little something to say, look folks, this is really bad, we've really got to pay attention. If we don't act now, we're toast. Is there any reason that can't happen?
I'm happy to try and respond to that. So yeah, I think there's something about our government and our local council haven't been as forthright about how serious the problems are, and I think people can see for themselves,
Well, that's
globally,
not enough,
we're getting
because
one
I'm
now,
getting
appreciate
back
that.
all the time. I'm getting economists all the time. Well, no, I'm saying that's not enough. I'm sorry.
We haven't
It's not.
finished it.
Yeah, so I think you're right, Sue. We do need to put leaflets through people's doors, and obviously the council tax is probably the most efficient way of doing that. We also need to engage with them in terms of helping them towards solutions you can do in your own life.
Yeah.
A lot of the things to actually save the planet also save you money. Better insulating your home and reducing your demands on energy.
We've got a Dorset Greener Homes. Welcome everybody. You can come and see my home. We've got a Dorset Greener Homes that we do every year now. I open homes. We're not perfect. We all try different things, but thank you anyway. So if that could happen very soon indeed, it's just so slow, and we are, in real pits.
I hear you big time. And also we said, back in 2019, we set out 100% things that we, as the council and as the community, need to do to try and make a difference. I've been asking, well, where's the action on those 100% things?
Good.
And I want that published on the website. I want people to see, where we're going, what we've done, what we're still to do. And actually, I want to see another list behind that, because I don't think that's enough. So I'm pushing. I'm with you. I'm pushing for it.
No, for the ordinary person.
Okay,
who just
thanks
every
very
day.
much. I've got just a point to make. A few years ago, we listed when localism came in, they brought the right to nominate a community asset, which gives the community the right to potentially, protect to some extent buildings they care about. We listed the old schoolhouse as a forum. I've got to check whether that's, I think we've refreshed it, but I'll want to check that. But it's been coming out recently about people who are concerned about what's happening with the Shelley Theatre, which is obviously it's a historical building, and it was an active place for people visiting for arts and things. And it's been shut now. The problem with the community assets is when it's over 5 years, if it's been shut for over 5 years, they're quite likely to refuse the application. So I'm recommending that we move forward as a group and list the Shelley Theatre as a community asset, just in case it's sold or if it's turned into flats or something. I'm hoping, I have heard that we're going to open about a year ago, but it's gone very quiet again, so it's not very...
Isn't the theatre within the building, isn't that listed? That's listed, isn't it?
Listing as a community asset is different to it being listed in terms of like grade 2 listing.
Oh, okay.
Listing as a community asset means that you can, if it comes up for sale, or it's going to have a change of use, then the community gets a year's moratorium in which they can raise funds, and they have a right to put forward a bid to buy the place to continue. So people list all sorts of things like their local post offices or their local pubs or things they care about. Where we've got sort of villages where they're losing everything there. This is a chance for community. It came in under localism in 2012, so it's a useful thing that if it does come to that stage that actually we might be able to preserve it and it doesn't cost anything.
You've interest helps on that one, Harry. I happened to speak to the Councillor Andy Martin, Councillor in Highcliffe about the Shelley Theatre and the concern that the community has that it's been so long. I wasn't aware at that time when I spoke to him that it was an asset of community value. But if I can hook you up with a portfolio for culture and communications, Andy Martin, because he's trying to pursue the owners of the premises to get an update, because from that perspective I think the communication has been pretty much non-existent as regards the future reopening of the theatre, and nobody I've spoken to that's visited the theatre hasn't gone, that's definitely something which we'd like to see.
There's a quite wide network of people who care about that building and that they're engaged with it, going to visit it, so yes, it'd be great to have some updates.
I think that'd be a very useful point for Councillor Martin to bring forward to the owners as well.
Okay, so I think unless there's anything else, we'll call that meeting to a close. Thank you to everyone for coming. Thank you to the steering group for all the hard work putting this together. Thank you to Morag, who's still going to be with us, but still going to be representing us. Thank you to Nancy for taking some great minutes. We will be putting this much quicker. We'll go up onto the forum YouTube channel, so if you want to share it with anyone or send it on, we have a YouTube channel, and we'll try and get it onto Facebook as well. Okay, thank you everyone, and good night.
Good, Harry.
I thought you might be interested in it.